Can a single line on a bank form completely override everything written in your will? She spent 3 years working with an attorney to build what she thought was an airtight estate plan. She wrote a will, she names her 2 children, Rachel and Tom, as equal beneficiaries of everything she owned. But when Diane passed away, one of her children got almost nothing, and it had absolutely nothing to do with what her will said. Let's understand it through the story of Diane. Diane had done what most people consider the responsible thing. In her late 60s, she sat down with an estate attorney, paid several $100s for a proper, legally reviewed will, and clearly stated that her estate, including her savings account, which held nearly $200,000, should be split equally between Rachel and Tom. She signed it in front of a notary and left that meeting feeling like the hard part was finally done. What Diane didn't know is that 15 years earlier, when she first opened that savings account, a bank teller had asked her a routine question. Would you like to name a payable-on-death beneficiary for this account? It was framed as a minor administrative detail. Diane, wanting to keep things simple, named Tom, her oldest child and the one who lived closer to the bank. She filled out a short form, signed it, and never thought about it again. That form simply sat in the bank system untouched for the next decade and a half. When Diane passed away, the bank followed standard procedure. It didn't consult her will at all. It looked at that old beneficiary form, confirmed Tom's identity, and released the full balance directly to him. Under the law, that form controlled exactly what happened to the money, regardless of anything her will said and regardless of the fact that the will was written and signed years afterward. Here's the rule almost nobody explains clearly. Certain assets are called beneficiary designated, or non-probate assets, and they pass directly to whoever is named on the account paperwork itself, completely bypassing the will, no matter how recent or how carefully written that will is. This category includes payable-on-death bank accounts and CDs, transfer-on-death brokerage accounts, retirement accounts like 401ks and IRAs, and life insurance policies. A will, by contrast, only controls what's legally called probate property, assets that don't already have a named beneficiary attached, like a house with no TOD deed, personal belongings, or an account with no beneficiary form on file. Think of a will as the default instructions for anything that doesn't already have its own separate instructions attached. A beneficiary form is exactly that. Separate instructions tied directly to one account that legally supersede whatever the will says. This is exactly why Diane's plan fell apart. Her attorney built a thorough will covering her general estate, but nobody ever cross-checked the beneficiary designations sitting inside her savings account. The will said 50-50, the account paperwork said 100% to Tom, and legally, the account paperwork wins every time. When Rachel discovered what happened months after the funeral, there was no fraud to report and no realistic way to challenge it in court. Courts generally uphold valid beneficiary designations exactly as written, since the account holder had every opportunity to update them and simply didn't. Tom hadn't done anything wrong either. He simply received what he'd been named to receive 15 years earlier, based on a decision his mother had long forgotten. By the time anyone realized the will and the account didn't match, the money was already gone. This mistake is far more common than people think, because most Americans open bank accounts, retirement accounts, and insurance policies years, sometimes decades, before they ever create a will. The beneficiary form gets filled out once, often during a routine, low-attention moment, and it's rarely revisited. It doesn't get reviewed after a divorce, a remarriage, or a new child or grandchild. It often doesn't even get reviewed when someone finally writes a formal will, because most people don't realize the 2 documents aren't connected at all, and that's precisely the problem. The average person can easily accumulate 5 or 6 different beneficiary forms across a lifetime, from old jobs, old banks, and old policies, each one silently overriding whatever the current will says. So what should you actually do? Start by making a complete written list of every account you own that could have a named beneficiary. Bank accounts, CDs, retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, and every life insurance policy, including smaller employer policies people often forget about. Then contact each institution directly and ask specifically what beneficiary is currently listed on file. Don't assume you remember correctly. Diane certainly didn't. Once you have that list, compare it against your current will and your current wishes line by line. Anytime you update your will, make it a habit to also review your beneficiary forms in that same sitting. These two documents never update each other automatically, no matter how recent the new one is. If you're naming multiple people, know that most institutions let you split a designation by percentage, so you're not limited to naming just one person, the way Diane was. It's also worth naming a contingent or backup beneficiary on every account. Finally, build a habit of reviewing every designation after any major life event: marriage, divorce, remarriage, a new child or grandchild, or the death of a named beneficiary. In Diane's case, there was no way to reverse what had already happened. Tom kept the full account balance, through no fault of his own. Rachel received only what remained from the much smaller portion of the estate actually covered under the will. The two siblings, who had always gotten along, went years without speaking, all stemming from a single form their mother had signed and forgotten about a decade and a half earlier. Diane did everything she thought a responsible person should do. She simply never knew that one piece of old paperwork was quietly working against her new one. The key lesson here is this: your will does not control every asset you own. Beneficiary designations on retirement plans, life insurance, and payable-on-death accounts override the will entirely, no matter how recent or how thorough the will is. The biggest mistake is assuming a will automatically updates older beneficiary paperwork, when in reality, the two documents operate completely independently for decades without either one checking in on each other. So take this as your checklist. List every account that could have a named beneficiary, contact each institution and confirm exactly who's listed, compare that list against your will, update anything outdated immediately after divorce, remarriage, or a new will, name contingent beneficiaries where possible, and build a habit of reviewing these designations as a regular habit, not a one-time task, the way Diane once treated it.